Hello SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoder. This will be part 8 in this series looking at ancient architecture and how especially the pyramids of Egypt, especially the Great Pyramid, encodes some very important knowledge, mathematical, geometric, astronomical and musical, and how it actually links with essentially all of the Great Pyramids of Egypt and how it links to other important sites such as the Parthenon, which is generally overlooked in this because it's considered to be of a later period, but the same geometry knowledge is embedded in here. But the Salama stone, the Doric, the Ionic and the common foot, amongst other units of measure, being a conversion tool. Mentioned earlier, the Doric represents, so that's a Doric column there, that's the column of strength, or the male column. We also have Ionic elements inside the Parthenon. Ionic, as in the Ionic foot, also represents the ideal Greek woman. So the human body, 4 cubits high by 4 cubits wide. The Greeks, just like the English system, 1 cubit is equal to 1.5 feet. There's not a the actual foot of the human does not relate to the cubit. The foot is essentially not actually related to the foot. It's a breakdown of units of measures of the human body related especially to the hand and the arm, not to the foot itself. But the ideal Greek woman, 4 Ionic cubits, 5.76 feet. The ideal Greek man, 6.4 feet. Those are both in modern English units, which just happens to be the common foot as described on the Salama stone at least 500 BC. Also mentioned that the ideal Old Kingdom Egyptian man of 4 Egyptian raw cubits, pi over 6 meters, so times by 4 is 2.0943951 meters, or 6.87 feet. If you look at Vitruvian man and actually look at the foot, well, the actual foot is closer to 6.9 feet as in the human foot, just a fraction under 6.9, and well, 6.87, just a fraction under 6.9 feet is equal to 4 Egyptian raw cubits. The relationship between the foot, the meter and the cubit we'll examine more, but there are many important relationships going on between these, measurable, embedded in ancient architecture across time as well. So again, the actual number of human feet connects to the number of English feet that describes the ideal Egyptian Old Kingdom man of 4 Egyptian cubits high or wide as well. Because as Vitruvius describes, if we have the Vitruvian man, so if a man be placed flat on his back with his hands and feet extended and a pair of compasses centered at his navel, the fingers and toes of his 2 hands and feet will touch the circumference of a circle described therefrom. So from the soles of your feet to the tip of your crown, to the tips of your outstretched fingers is equal, your width from fingertip to fingertip is equal to your height, and if the compasses that draw this circle are set on your navel, as in the umbilicus or the navel stone, this was an important feature in, well, still now, as in a navel stone would be the center of a city from where all measurements are taken. So for instance, there was a navel or an umbilicus stone in Rome, where all the measurements, all roads lead to Rome, and therefore they're all measured from there. We find a omphalos, or a navel stone, at the temple of Apollo at Delphi. This is the same concept as the Ben stone, the center of the world, or the center of the city. And we still have those now. There'll be a point in the city from where all measures are taken. I did a series on phallus, navel, Ben stones, went into that now. Now, so the height of a man is equal to his outstretched fingers, making the radius of a circle 5 and the edge length of a square 8 to 5. Those are Fibonacci numbers, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. So there's a Fibonacci spiral, and that rectangle would be 8 wide to 5 high. Now if you look at the pyramids of Giza, beginning with Menkaure pyramid, 125 Egyptian raw cubits high, 200 Egyptian raw cubits wide, which is a 5 to 8 ratio. Therefore the Fibonacci spiral describes Menkaure's pyramid. Earlier in the Fibonacci spiral, we have this portion which is 2 high to 3 wide, 3 wide to 2 high. Khafre's pyramid, 411 Egyptian raw cubits wide and 274 Egyptian raw cubits high. That's a 2 to 3 ratio, which is the same as the Vesica Piscis. One circle with the second circle having its center on the edge of the first, 3 to 2. 1, 2, 3 wide, 1, 2 high. So the Giza pyramids, Menkaure, Khafre and Khufu, as well as the red and the bent pyramid. There's a lot going on here geometrically connecting not just the Giza pyramids but the other of the great pyramids of Egypt. So for instance, Menkaure's pyramid is 200 Egyptian raw cubits wide. The height of the red pyramid and the height of the bent pyramid is 200 Egyptian raw cubits high. That's one of the links. But now if you look at the geometry wider sense, so back to the Vesica 2 to 3 ratio. The Vesica is the foundation of this particular geometry. So we see the Vesica, now we just keep drawing circles where they intersect. We have the seed of life, and the seed of life is the same geometry as to be found in the Osiron, and really cross time, cross cultures, cross the world, because nature insists on it. Now if you draw a circle, where are you going to put your second circle? You're going to put it on the edge of the first. That's to create this symmetry, the idea of symmetry in the human body, the idea of symmetry in temples. This 3 to 2 ratio can be found in, well, so many ancient sites and still being used in modern sites as well, because it's, well, nature insists on it, and it's just, it creates beautiful ratios, and there's a lot of wonderful maths and astronomy and music connected with this as well. So the 2 to 3 ratio, that describes Khafre's pyramid, 3 wide by 2 high. It also links Khufu's pyramid with the red pyramid, because the red pyramid is 420 Egyptian raw cubits wide. The Great Pyramid is 280 Egyptian raw cubits high. That's a 3 to 2 ratio. Very musical. We'll see that more. But also inside the Vesica, Proposition 1, Book 1 of Euclid's Elements, to create an equilateral triangle. We also get an equilateral triangle this way. Now if we expand that geometry out, equilateral triangles will grow in size, and it's essentially it's the square root of 3 is the rate of growth, which is a very important thing as well. Now we'll get into that later. But also an equilateral triangle, so if you get an equilateral triangle and bend it over until it touches the sides of the bent pyramid, that's what's going on there as well. Now that's will lead to the hexagon. So equilateral triangles, now the seed of life, creates a perfect hexagon. It's built into nature. That's why beehives use it. It's one of the most, it's essentially the most efficient shape for stacking items. That's beehives use it because it's the strongest and most efficient with least use of resources to create it. You'll also find that on the poles of Saturn, for instance. You have a hexagon. It's 6 equilateral triangles blended together. And so the bent pyramid has this in there. Now the top portion of a bent pyramid is a pentagon or a pentagram folded over. We'll get back, because that's a hexagon is 6, pentagram is 5, 6 to 5 ratio. Very, very important as well in explaining the connections between pyramids and measurement and other sites as well. Keep that in mind in future episodes, but I will remind you. But this 3 to 2 ratio links the red pyramid and Khufu's pyramid and Khafre's pyramid. Also the basic geometry from that describes the bottom portion of the red pyramid, bent pyramid, sorry. Now that right angle triangle described by Khafre's pyramid, also in the pyramid of Amenemhotep and some other smaller, less known ones, is a 3-4-5 triangle. The king's chamber, or the upper chamber in the Great Pyramid, also creates a 3-4-5 triangle. Now the paving of that particular has been a bit of restoration, let's call it, but even by the oldest descriptions, there was a narrow channel running around the outside, which gave us 2 heights within the upper chamber. below, inside that channel, the true floor of the king's chamber creates a 3-4-5 triangle as well. Now a 3-4-5 triangle, Egyptian rope stretchers did use it in a later era. Herodotus and others suggest that it was used earlier. However, it is built into the pyramid architecture. So even if the rope stretchers were using this to measure land after a flood to adjust taxes, even if this is only of a later period, we do find it in the pyramids themselves, and not just in Khafre's pyramid or the Great Pyramid, also in a few of the others as well. So it's repeated often enough to be of interest. Now, Pythagoras is given the credit for Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is one of the most important discoveries in humanity, because from this understanding emerges so much essence of understanding geometry, understanding math. From that, all the sciences are built. This is one of the foundation building blocks of all science still, the Pythagorean theorem. It's based on a right angle triangle. Now, if you have a right angle triangle, Pythagorean theorem will work, but the first of the perfect Pythagorean triangles is the 3-4-5 triangle, in that 3 squared, a squared, plus 4 squared, b squared, so 9, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16. Add them together, you get 25. 5 squared is 25. This is why it's the perfect Pythagorean triplet. It's not a fraction, it's not a decimal. The next one would be 5, 12, 13 triangle, which can be found in places such as Stonehenge, for instance. And this will link to places such as ancient megalith structures in Karnak or the stone circles in the UK. This also links to music. So for instance, 3-2, the 3-2 ratio, that's the perfect fifth in music theory, Pythagorean music theory. And the 3-4-5 triangle, well, you fold a Vesica in half, you get a 4-3 ratio. That's the perfect fourth in music. Now, we also have this, what's called the tetractys, which describes music theory rather lovely. Now, 1-2 in regards to tones, but 2-3, the perfect fifth. 3-4, the perfect fourth in music theory. And that tetractys is the tetractys, Pythagoreans swore an oath on the tetractys. There is geometry in the humming of the strings, there is music in the spacing of the spheres. Also note the 3-4-5 triangle, that's one of the best proofs of Pythagorean theorem. It's been proved many times. Now we also have musical references, geometric references in this particular painting, which of course come much later, but this is all Pythagorean knowledge. There is no text written by Pythagoras, at least that survives, but ancient writers spoke of Pythagoras, and they spoke of his math and geometry. So even if Pythagoras was invented, shortly after and around that same time, many writers speak of Pythagoras and these particular discoveries. Goethe said architecture is for frozen music, music is the flowing architecture. So many philosophers, esotericians, hermeticists have spoken of these similar themes, how music, geometry, astronomy and arithmetic flow together and encompass the same system of knowledge. The quadrivium, music, geometry, arithmetic and astronomy. The previous system, you can even find it in the great cathedrals. It was a holistic system where you had to learn about music and therefore you would learn about geometry. You had to learn about geometry, therefore you'd learn about astronomy. You had to learn about astronomy, therefore you'd learn about arithmetic. Very much different from our method or our systems today, where it's specialized and we don't really blend. One thing doesn't blend to one another. Which brings us back to the tetractys. Keep this in mind, and we see the tetractys up here in this particular painting. And now we look at Hermes Trismegistus and Metatron's cube, as in Enoch. Okay, so as the legend goes, Enoch knew the flood was coming. To preserve the knowledge, he built a subterranean chamber with 9 arches. In there he put a cube, with the Tetragrammaton, the name of God, also 2 pillars which preserve mathematical, geometric, astronomical and musical knowledge, as the legend goes. Now Enoch then became the angel Metatron, and we still see Metatron's cube, which is a great 2D representation of a three-dimensional platonic solids, as in Plato. So just like Pythagoras and Plato were both geometricians. Now, as the legend goes, Pythagoras uncovered the knowledge left by Enoch, and so did Hermes Trismegistus. But if we focus on Metatron's cube, that's the same geometry which emerges from the Vesica Piscis, which leads to the seed of life, which leads to the fruit and flower of life, as seen in the Osiron, for instance. Now, Enoch also, on the cube, he had the Tetragrammaton, the name of God, which is 1, 2, 3, then 4 letters, just like the Tetractys of the Pythagoreans. 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, which has other aspects connecting 33 and 288. I did that in previous series, but this same Tetragrammaton, or the Tetractys, also incorporates this musical knowledge as well, the 2 to 3 and the 3 to 4, the 1 to 2 as well for tones too. But back to the Vitruvian Man, we have a 5 to 8 ratio, which describes the Fibonacci sequence, including the 2 to 3 ratio there, so the Fibonacci sequence emerges from the Vesica. The 2 to 3 ratio of the Vesica Piscis describes Khafre's pyramid. The 8 to 5 ratio of the Fibonacci sequence describes Menkaure's pyramid, 8 to 5. Now, so if you were to drop the Salamis stone and on top of here, we could get the same thing going on here, a 2 to 3 ratio. So the Salamis stone, which incorporates the Doric, the male, the Ionic, the female, and the allegedly modern English foot, or the common Greek foot, that is a 2 to 3 ratio, just like the Vesica Piscis, which emerges from the Fibonacci sequence. Now also the Salamis stone, the Doric, the Ionic and the common foot, amongst the Samian foot and some others, but just to focus on those for the moment. The height of the columns, including the entablature, is 48 common feet, which is equal to 45 Doric feet, which is equal to 50 Ionic feet. Just like the capstone at the Red Pyramid, this is a conversion tool between multiple sets of ancient measure, also incorporating very important geometric features in there as well. But the Salamis stone, so we have the Doric foot, but from that bar, which describes a Doric foot, from there to the top is 1 Doric cubit. So just like we still do now, 1 cubit is 1.5 feet. The foot is not in proportion to the cubit. The foot is derived from the cubit, fingers and hands. But what we have is the Doric cubit. Now from the Doric cubit to the bottom would be 1 Ionic foot. But also we have the common Greek, or the English foot, embedded in this in the Salamis stone as well. And how does that link up? Well, we have, again, back to the 8 to 5 Fibonacci ratio. So the Doric foot and the English foot. Of course, the 3 to 2 ratio of the Vesica. The 8 to 5 as well. Well, 8 divided by 5 is 1.6. And 1 Doric cubit is 1.6 English feet. So if that is 1 English foot, then that is the length of a Doric cubit, 8 to 5 again. Which brings us back to the pyramids of Giza. So the Menkaure pyramid, an 8 to 5, as we see there in the Vesica, as also in the Fibonacci spiral, Fibonacci sequence, as is seen in Vitruvian Man. Well, how does this link up? Well, so Menkaure's pyramid is 8 to 5 ratio. If the height is 1, then the width is 1.6, or 5 to 8. Now we also have the pyramid of Meidum. That is 107 based on, so there are portions left, so we still know the slope angle. Matthew Flinders Petrie was one of those to survey it. So we have a good, very good idea of what the height to the base is. So it was 175 Egyptian royal cubits high, and 275 Egyptian royal cubits wide. The Great Pyramid is 280 Egyptian royal cubits high and 440 Egyptian royal cubits wide. So 280 Egyptian royal cubits high divided by 175 Egyptian royal cubits high equals 1.6, or 8 over 5. The width of the Great Pyramid, 440 Egyptian royal cubits, divided by the width of the Meidum Pyramid, 275, so 440 divided by 275 equals 1.6, or 8 over 5 as well. The pyramids are geometrically linked. So the 8 over 5 ratio describes Menkaure's pyramid from the height to the, from the width to the height, 8 over 5. 8 over 5 describes the scale of the Great Pyramid and the Meidum Pyramid, which is a Fibonacci sequence, which is also embedded in Vitruvian Man. Vitruvian Man as well incorporates this lovely secret between the English foot and the actual number of feet, 6.87 English feet, would describe an Old Kingdom man of 4 Egyptian royal cubits high, and Egyptian royal cubit being pi over 6 meters. The symmetry of the temple, so as Vitruvius says, and Vitruvius wrote about it clearly, we also know in other Greek writings that the man is the measure of all things, and this same principle was practiced in ancient Greek structures, and the Greeks and the Romans learnt from the Egyptians. They're not shy about telling us. There's a lot of stuff out there that they stole this knowledge. Well, they tell us point blank that they learnt it from there. They learnt it. They didn't steal it. They give credit to the people. But this concept, the design of a temple depends on symmetry, the principles of which must be most carefully observed by the architect. They are due to proportion in Greek. Proportion is a correspondence among the measures of a member of an entire work and of the whole to a certain part selected as standard. From this result the principles of symmetry. Without symmetry and proportion there can be no principles in the design of any temple. That is, if there is no precise relationship between its members, as in the case of those of a well-shaped man. Man is the measure of all things, the proportion, and from also the measures emerge from their feet, cubits, fingers, inches or thumbs, span. These are all embedded. So gods of weights and measure, gods of geometry, gods of knowledge and alchemy and medicine. The ancient gods of science were the gods of architecture, the gods of geometry and maths, especially gods of weights and measures. The principles of ancient architecture, not just by the writings of people such as Vitruvius and earlier Greek writings, but also visible in the actual measurable proportions of, for instance, the Great Pyramids of Egypt correspond to the same particular method, the same knowledge, the same philosophy of symmetry and proportion, and man is the measure of all things. So still looking at tip of the iceberg so far, but what we have is a repeated, measurable, tangible system that unites all of the ancient architecture and is still being used by those select architects in the modern age. Again, I.M. Pei, Norman Foster, sculptors such as Tony Rosenthal, who recently passed, or recently, I'm not sure, maybe 5-10 years, but these are the same architects and sculptors who get the prime commissions in really important places, and the esoteric, Masonic, Hermetic legends, the origins of official measurements, such as the English system we see now, is so embedded, so deep in the esoteric and ancient architecture. And more to come on this, but it's tangible. It doesn't rely on symbols, can be interpreted in many ways. The written word can be interpreted and lost in time. In one generation, certain words have changed a lot and changed their meaning. But for geometry, the measurement are universal constants. They do not change. And this is a fundamental truth, and this is why the ancients were clever in that way, because just like we understand math and geometry now being key rules of the universe, they understood this as well and embedded it in their architecture, and the pyramids, not just one, not just two, not just three, but all of the pyramids of Egypt, of the great ones, are incorporating this same system. This lovely maths, this lovely geometry, which describes nature in so many ways. And the systems of measurement incorporate and lead to, again, lovely numbers, lovely geometric constants. And it's measurable. And that's makes it very, very important. And it's also one of the reasons why it's easily dismissed by the establishment. Firstly, because most archaeologists are not really trained in math, for instance, or geometry. They're trained in the arts, whether it's engineering, maths, geology, not so much, but especially math. It's just not considered. Even the idea of measurement and importance of metrology is just not in the textbooks for something to be considered seriously. However, it does link. It links exquisitely. And there's still so much more to come in regards to this. Again, I'm still just laying the groundwork, because we're going to be linking so many other aspects, again, across time, across the world. We'll even find traces in the stonework in Scandinavia, in ancient India, and really across the where the Silk Road and that trade route. Across time, you will find that information embedded in the architecture, not just the legends, not just the symbolism, which can be interpreted in many ways, but the geometry of the architecture, the measurement systems, cannot be argued with. They are there to be measured. And with that, hope you enjoyed, and still a lot more to come, and have a good one.